Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or a loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
All right. Hello and welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I am your host, your podcast host, Mr. Bill Rader. And joining me, my co-host, my co-navigator in this podcast, crazy podcast world, Mr. Sean Kane. Sean, how's it going today?
Billy Raids, how you doing, buddy?
Doing great. No complaints. Very interesting guest this week.
Yes.
Very interesting. Just listening to his story is wow.
Yeah. So we have Mark Harris on. He's the author of Houses of the Holy, and he's got his own story where, you know, he goes really up against the right wing, the extreme right wing, religious right, you know, this cabal really of, and you see where all these groups working together, Bill. You see how the Klan works and the Christian right, and you know, secret societies, even like the Knights Templar and the Freemasons are working with the Klan, and the Mafia is working, you know what I mean? So this is where the overworld, the underworld connected. We always talk about on our show. It kind of all came together, and Mark, you know, went head to head with it. And his story is really incredible.
It's a crazy story. And, you know, and the thing is, Sean, he kind of skipped the, you know, the genesis of all of it, and kind of got into the results and what was happening with him. And I asked him if he would go back, you know, I guess the whole story's in his book, but I asked him if, you know, partway through, if he would go back and explain what the story is. So, you know, just know that he's going to get to it at some point. But
yeah, I mean, there was a lot to it, Bill, to get, you know, or podcast and tell the whole story is difficult.
Right.
There's so much information, but you know, he did a great job, and he's a smart dude. I mean, you know, he's a pilot by trade, and you know, really smart guy, well educated, and it's just an amazing story. But it's kind of fits in with what we're doing lately, Bill, in our episodes where we're really going about the extreme right wing and the dangers of the right wing, and it ties in everything today. And seeing that face to face, what a threat it is.
Crazy, absolutely crazy. So, all right, Sean, anything before we send our audience to the interview?
Let's have at it, Billy. It's a good one.
Let's do it. All right, enjoy this interview with Mark Harris. I want to welcome Mark Harris to That's Enough Out of You. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Been looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Lot to cover with you, Sean. Why don't we jump right in? Let's get started.
Well, Mark is the author of Houses of the Holy, and the book is up on our bookshop. People can get it there. It's a fantastic book. It's really his story about, you know, how he clashed with this I don't even know how to describe it, Mark, this cabal of, you know, religious right wing, Freemasons, Ku Klux Klan. I mean, we got everybody in this story, and it's incredible. So before we get into the details of the book, just give a quick bio of yourself, and if you could give a shout out to Chris Mulligan, the publisher here at Trine Day, who was instrumental in getting this book out, because I never met Chris, but I'm really familiar with his work, and I respect a lot of the stuff he does. A lot of the work he does is just great. So you want to start there, and we'll go from there, buddy.
Sure. Yeah. Mark Harris. Grew up in a small town in North Georgia. Attended North Georgia College, which is now university. Joined the Air Force. Flew C-130s in the Air Force. Flew cargo for about a year after that. Then airline. Ended up losing my medical certification as a pilot through criminal fraud by a bunch of right-wing extremists, driven into total poverty, ganged up on by the entire federal government, but we'll get into that later. But anyhow, eventually clawed my way back. Now I'm an examiner authorized by the FAA. I work for a large corporation. I train and evaluate pilots, corporate pilots who fly the rich and powerful. And, it's a great job. I do miss flying. I'd love to fly again. Unfortunately, that doesn't appear to be in the mix, as the government intends to continue to hold my medical certification hostage. So,
Wow. And talk to me about Chris Mulligan real quick.
oh yes, absolutely. Sorry, yeah. Chris, awesome guy, in a day where I've learned that, real investigative journalism appears to be dead. There's so much in my story, hard, cold facts, explosive stuff that the press just won't touch. But he touches those stories. He helps get those stories out. I pounded on many, many, many doors over the years trying to get my story out. He was one of them. Another one was David Denton, who is a JFK assassination researcher, puts on a conference every year. They ended up discussing me. They both talked to me. I came up in their conversation. This was about when I was running into a block wall about getting my book done. And Chris called me up and said, we need to get this book done, and he offered to take it over financially and get the editing done and publishing done and everything. So that was a godsend. And Chris is an awesome guy. Met him, went out to the JFK assassination conference last year and spent some time with him there, and just a super guy. So.
Let's start your story. Let's start though with the town, growing up in, was it White County, Georgia? I guess that's a right name for a town from what I read about it.
Yeah, well, we were literally surrounded by sunset counties, where only white people were allowed after dark. That's how bad it was back then. White County wasn't quite as bad, but it was and still does have that element, prevailing element. I'm pretty much persona non grata in my hometown now. Cover this a little bit in the book, how me and my kids were just, blacklisted there and treated like garbage because I spoke out against extremism and really was really just speaking out for my kids and what they've been victims of. So.
Well, let's get into a little of the book, but before we do, I want to talk about the right wing for a little bit, especially the religious right, because I always seen the biggest threat coming from the right side, especially the extreme right. And after reading your book, it's unbelievable how a lot of these right wing extreme groups that you wouldn't think would be joined together, work together quite frequently, and like for instance, the Ku Klux Klan and the Freemasons.
Yeah, they all overlap, and when you get in, what I believe based on what I've experienced and what I've researched, I, I don't believe I was part of some global Masonic conspiracy. I'm talking about Albert Pike, Southern Freemasons, Morals and Dogma. It's a 600 something page rambling occult rant, plagiarizing occultist Eliphas Levi, that this was their Bible for over 100 years. There are all sorts of Freemasons out there. I don't think, people in the lodge in England are, out raping kids or plotting against, governments. But
yeah, we're talking about extremists here.
Yeah, we're talking about extremists. And, studies have been shown, that, in the South, there's a tremendous overlap in Freemason membership and Ku Klux Klan membership. If you go back to, Albert Pike, for example, was alleged to be the judicial officer for the Ku Klux Klan, but he was the big grand poobah of the Freemasons as well.
Right.
All the Confederate generals were Freemasons. And one character in my story, he was dead before most of the events in my story, but a background character was Bob Sykes. I found this the other day. This is a new document I discovered. This is a declassified CIA document. Bob Sykes was a member of the Crestview, Florida, is there in the Panhandle, Freemason Lodge. He was responsible for procuring the funds for Eglin Air Force Base, instrumental in the development of Eglin Air Force Base. And there's so many military ties in the story, it'll make your head spin.
Right.
Bob Sykes, he served in the OSS, that's the predecessors of the CIA, as you know, attached to Psychological Warfare Department. And guess what? He was a 33rd degree Mason Knight Templar. He was named after Robert E. Lee. His father was a Confederate soldier. He was a segregationist. So that kind of sums up what these Southern Freemasons were really like.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I want to get into your story, but one last thing before we do. Did you ever find any connection to any of this with like CIA MK Ultra program or any mind control programs? Did you find any type of connection? Because I see that the possibilities there after reading your
I
book.
see that too. I do believe that is likely because you're talking about organized abuse of children, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, what appears to be possibly some kind of honey trap. In terms of ties to the CIA, yes, several. They're peripheral, but you know, one of the characters in the story, he's pals with Richard Secord of Iran-Contra fame. You have this guy in South Florida who's creating all these corporations with these Knight Templar occult names. Well, he was tied to mobsters. One of those mobsters, Alberto the Great Corrupter, San Pedro, had a hitman who worked for him, Ricky Prado, who was, you know, a hitman for a cocaine trafficker turned CIA agent as he continued to perform hits for the mob. He was working for the CIA and ended up being a big shot at Blackwater. Another peripheral character, a guy named Carlos Cordon and a developer named Tony Majares, still all part of this Miami crowd that my ex-father-in-law was tied to financially. They were involved in oil for food scandal with Saddam Hussein, plot to sell cluster bombs to Saddam Hussein that was authorized by the CIA director secretly. And so, yeah, lots of ties, peripheral ties to CIA dirty tricks crowd, Blackwater, and so forth. So
There's also a tie to the son of Santo Trafficante, right?
It's actually this cop who kept running around cleaning up after my ex-father-in-law and his partners and trying to frame me. His father was a mob hitman tied to Trafficante Jr. and
Wow.
Antonio Cardo.
Tony Carter from Chicago.
Yeah,
Chicago.
yeah. And they were involved in a union kickback scheme and so forth, and involved in lots of murders and stuff. Human trafficking, pornography, drug trafficking, and so forth. So, and then there, and that crowd in Miami, there are multiple mob ties as well. In fact, if you go back to the development, the history of Valparaiso, Niceville, Florida, and Eglin Air Force Base, there was mob influence. Mr. Al Capone himself was spending his winters there. He was partners in crime with the people who donated the property for Eglin Air Force Base, who were tied to my ex-father-in-law. So,
and there's also a tie into George Bush's former attorney, right?
Yeah, he showed up at my church, out of the blue, showed an unusual interest in a restraining order I'd filed to protect my kids, pried me for information, conned him, told me about the divorce he was going through and everything to try to win my confidence. And later he set me up with a crooked attorney who made deals behind my back and sold me out as my attorney. And then just as soon as he had appeared, he disappeared. So, and this was at a Calvary Chapel in Gulf Breeze, where the leaders there pulled out all the stops to try to silence me and my kids and to cover for a monster. And that was one of the most disappointing aspects of this, because it was it started at my ex-father-in-law's church, a Church of Christ, and it followed me from church after church. These church leaders trying to silence me and my kids and say, shut up about Mac Nobles, don't talk about this, just forget about it, go away, pretend it never happened. And you know, it didn't make sense, but anyhow, so.
Sean, we've got to get into the story because
I know we do. Go ahead, Mark. I just want to do some back stuff, but go ahead wherever you want to pick a story up and go from there, buddy.
Well, you know, let me dive in right in the middle. This is the heat of the battle here. I was living in Florida. You know, a whole bunch of stuff had happened in Florida, including the kidnapping of my kids and so forth. Sorry for my cough. I'm getting over pneumonia, literally. So show up at the airline for work. I'm scheduled to fly. All of a sudden, my schedule gets deleted, and I'm summoned to the chief pilot's office, told I have to go to see the head of human resources, and I get escorted over to the human resource office. The human resource manager is named James Brenberry. This is not in the book. We're going to do an updated version of the book because I just learned about it a few months ago. But it turns out James Brenberry, just like my ex-father-in-law, was raping and torturing foster kids. And he's being held without bond in Georgia now, using a gun, children under 10 years old, forcing them into child pornography and so forth. So you have these two scumbags, these two child rapists, colluding to target my job, which is about what happened next. Again, he's from another right-wing family. His father-in-law is a big shot in the Freemasons and Shriners and a police chief from Maine. He sent his kids to a segregation academy in Georgia, you know, an all-white, you know, homophobic school that was founded as a segregation academy. And this is a guy who got rewarded after this as the equal opportunity manager at Delta Airlines. You know, so anyhow.
Wow.
So I guess to Jim Brenberry, they received this complaint from my ex-father-in-law, who was hiding in South America at the time. Got the here's one of the emails from him demanding that I go see the company doctor, our flight surgeon he referred to. Well, it wasn't the company didn't have a doctor. He was a hand-picked doctor. This was a medical assassination. The doctor they forced me to go to was I show up at his office. He's got this right-wing literature, John Birch Society literature in his office, you know, in his lobby. And I go into his office, and there's, you know, pictures of Anubis, god of the dead, and pyramids and stuff all over his wall. Turns out he's another, you know, John Birch Society, you know, Freemason clown. So I'm subjected to a completely illegal urinalysis because there was no reasonable suspicion, which of course I passed with flying colors. Then he insists that I go see a psychiatrist for a psychological evaluation. So if they can't, you know, frame me for alcohol, they're going to frame me as being crazy.
Sure.
The doctor they send me to for the psychological evaluation is a Dr. Michael Haberman. He's, you know, has posts that's gone viral on the internet. He's a racist, narcissistic, homophobic clown, or I should say Islamophobic clown. Has this long rambling post that went viral on Facebook, calling the Guantanamo Bay lawyers enemies of the state, all sorts of racist comments about Barack Obama and so forth. So, and I found some other sources of his, you know, letters to the editor at Atlanta Journal-Constitution opposing universal health care. So this ultra right-winger guy they send me to for this psychological evaluation, which I passed with flying colors, by the way. So I fly home from this psychological evaluation. Now we're up to March of 2010. Next morning, I'm arrested, handcuffed, shackled, strip searched, locked in a holding cell for 6 days, placed under false arrest, held pending, guess what, a psychological evaluation. Ended up with 5 psychological evaluations, passed all of them with flying colors. Polygraph I passed, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of illegal drug and alcohol tests that I passed. They tried to frame me 7 times in Florida, and this is just one of them. This was all triggered by me trying to get a murder witnessed by my kids investigated and a lynching. We found the site of the murder and the lynching with my son's photographic memory. It's exactly as they described in advance. And that's when all hell broke loose. They ended up trying to frame me in 2 counties in Florida for making a false report. They claimed the site wasn't there. Of course, I've got pictures of it. It was there. But interestingly, this site corresponded, and I just learned this recently, corresponded precisely with a description of property owned by the Crestview Masonic Lodge, where they had performed outdoor rituals until the 80s. Just nearby this site, there was an Interstate 10 overpass, all sorts of occult symbols, a big giant ram's head painted on it, a depiction of a lynching, upside down black crosses, all this white supremacist and occult, graffiti on this bridge, consistent with everything else. By the way, they arrested me on March 18th, which was the anniversary of the execution of Jack de Molay, the head of the Knights Templar. Previously they kidnapped my kids on Halloween. Those may be coincidences, but that pattern continued with events on cursed days. So anyway, so fast forward, so I pass all, they sent me for a full battery psychological test, pass those with flying colors. So then Dr. Harper, this John Birch Society Freemason doctor, sends this memo to the FAA all the way to Washington, D.C., bypassing everybody in between, claiming I have a history of alcohol abuse. It's well documented that he pulled out of his rear end, and request I be issued a special issuance medical certificate. The very next day, this woman in Oklahoma City, her name's Sandy Clymer, she comes from another Eastern Star Freemason military family. She plants a fake DUI in my records. Same day, this Dr. William Mills sends me a letter saying my medical certificate, which had been issued the previous January, or my medical application, which had been submitted the previous January, was denied because it disclosed a history of alcohol abuse. Well, it didn't disclose anything because there had been nothing to disclose. It was all sleight of hand, smoke and mirrors crap. None of these people had any authority to do anything with my medical certificate. It was, every bit of this was completely illegal. So I get this letter. I'm fighting for my, now I'm put out of work. I'm doing odd jobs. I'm digging a ditch, for a friend of mine's mother, with a double hernia, just trying to feed my 2 kids and keep them in therapy and so forth. Fighting for my career at the same time. So I ordered my medical records from the FAA to see what the hell's going on. So while I'm waiting for my medical records, I get this letter from a Dr. Steve Goodman, the regional flight surgeon for the FAA in San Francisco, in California, the Pacific Division, where I've never lived or worked, saying my appeal of my medical certification has been denied. Well, I never filed an appeal. I never had an opportunity to file an appeal. I was never even told I was under investigation. And then he changes it. It had been a history of alcohol abuse. Now they say I have a history of alcoholism. So when I got my medical records, there's this bizarre rambling report in there from a Dr. Alan Sager that said I had a DUI in 1998, that I've been treated for alcoholism and all this nonsense, quoting me and saying I quit drinking because I couldn't raise my kids. All of it completely made up. I mean, absolutely, totally made up.
We will be right back.
Hey, Sean, I want to make sure that everybody knows about our Patreon. I know we mention it every once in a while on the show, but really important that people check out our Patreon. If you go to Patreon and search for That's Enough Out of You, or just click on the link in the description, you'll find we do an extra episode every week called The Speakeasy, and it's really usually just Sean and I kind of talking about the day's events, current events, and things like that. But a lot of exciting things. I mean, I know, Sean, you're constantly putting articles up there on our Patreon.
Yeah, and sometimes, Bill, we do bring on special guests. We had Dave Whelan on, we had Scranton Dave, and every now and then we bring Patreon members on. We've had different members, Scott Alfieri, Michael Pilch, Dan Hankey was on. So, there's an opportunity there. If you want to come on the show with us, You know, so there's a lot of things we're doing. Like you mentioned, Bill, the articles. I put articles up on a free site, but I also put articles on Patreon that's not available on the free site. You know, we have a lot of times I put up future intel about guests that we have coming up and stuff that we have coming up on the podcast. And you know, we created a great community there, Bill. There's a lot of chat goes on there. There's a community chat and a lot of the comments back and forth. Just the Patreon members always have great insight. So it's a community, Bill, and it's an opportunity for people to join for a really good price, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, you can't beat it. You can certainly become a free member if you want to. There's also tiered levels to you know, with subscription amounts, and just for $1 that gets you everything. I mean, the $1 gets you everything, you know, including our weekly show. There's other tiers. I think, Sean, what is there? A $3 tier?
$3, there's a $5, there's a $10. I mean, and there's a $50 if people could afford to give 50.
Yeah, I mean, totally up to you. You know, once you join, you can make that decision, and certainly, you know, there's no commitment. I mean, you could join for a month or 2 months or whatever you want, and then you know, you can switch your subscription around. Totally up to you. I mean, that's, you know, people love Patreon for that reason. It really is. It makes it easy. It's kind of, you know, however you want to do it, however you want to join. And we certainly appreciate anybody who joins our Patreon and supports the show, because we definitely, you know, Sean, we're not getting rich off of this podcast, that's for sure. But we definitely, you know, appreciate any support that we get from our listeners.
And, you know, we also have our merchandise store. If people want to check out, we have the shirt that I have on now. We have mugs up there. We have cups, hats, anything you can do to help the podcast grow. We also have a bookshop up there, Bill, where all the authors that we have on our podcast, we have their books up. And it supports local bookstores, Bill. The money goes to local bookstores, a little bit to us, and then to the publisher and to the author. So it's a real good opportunity instead of buying Amazon and you know, making
supporting billionaires.
Right, sure. There's an opportunity. And as far as Patreon, one last thing, Bill, if you want to join as a free member, we do put some stuff up there for the free members, and then if you like it and you want to upgrade, you can do that.
Absolutely. So definitely check out our Patreon. Like I said, there's a link in the description to our Patreon, or you can just go to Patreon and search for That's Enough Out of You, look for our logo, and just fill in the information and you can join. All right, that's it, Sean. We appreciate all of our Patreon members, and we hope that you guys will consider checking it out if you haven't joined. Thank you.
So in the end, they forced my kids to testify in this case against me. Both the kids testify they witnessed their grandfather commit murder, hang the body from a tree and burn it. Their grandfather had a ton of weapons. He's a felon. The sheriff's department armed him in the middle of all this, by the way, and tried to cover it up. And that they found a pistol in the house and fired it, and could have been killed. They buried the kid's testimony, and the state attorney tells the court reporter not to transcribe it. I never would have got a copy had I not had a lawyer in that case. My parents had to go into debt to help me out and hire a lawyer. He made sure he had a copy of the deposition before he walked out of the building, or it would have all been buried forever. So then on October 13th, the anniversary of the order to round up the Knights Templar, I'm issued a fake medical certificate, a special issuance medical certificate labeling me an alcoholic and making me a second-class citizen, basically. I never applied for it. I never authorized anybody to apply for it for me. I never had an exam for it. I never filled out an application for it. And my original medical certificate had been canceled, not revoked, but canceled through a scheme of criminal fraud. That is ongoing. I just got a response in March from a FOIA request, and the Dr. Melcher J. Antoinano, Director, Civil Aerospace Medical Institute. Out of the 15 records that I requested, he just blatantly lied in at least 10 of the requests, and at least 3 of the requests he says there are no records, which means he's either lying or the records have been destroyed. Fast forward to now we're up to 2013. I decided to try to appeal all this and fight it in court, and they come after me with guns blazing. I end up ganged up on in court by 6 government attorneys, including Sally Quillian Yates, the former acting attorney general, Stuart F. Dellery, Joe Biden's former chief counsel, 4 other big muckety-muck government attorneys. The same day that the IRS targets me, threatens to seize my assets. They blocked me from getting unemployment benefits, blocked me from getting a job. I'm blacklisted in the whole state. And then I'm being offered the carrot and the stick from this church in Georgia, where we've been invited to attend, that I found out later was a church of the sheriff's department chaplain in my own county, the Freemason sheriff. They're threatening to burn my house down if I don't drop this case in court. You need to drop this or somebody might burn your house down, he says. So that's where it ended up in 2013. Just the government put the massive squeeze on me, trying to starve me and my kids to death, and hung out to dry by my own union and my own company. So anyhow, another interesting fact, the man behind the curtain in this sabotage of my medical certification was a guy named Dr. Michael Berry. He's been in the San Francisco Chronicle, the Washington Examiner, for being the author of the Berry scheme, they called it. It's a scheme to deprive pilots who are whistleblowers of their medical certification. He was a former medical officer at the Johnson Space Center. His father was the doctor who chose all the Apollo astronauts, who were all Freemasons, as you might know, except for 2 whose fathers were Freemasons. But and his father was Charles Berry, was a grotesque racist, based on an interview I found with him. Horrible stuff, talking about the blacks, and calling out the blacks from the Apollo program, standing up to John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, and refusing their direct order to having a black astronaut, comparing Africans to wild beasts running around in spears and furs. I mean, just awful stuff. Bragging about getting out of his car and getting in the face of Reverend Abernathy in a protest. So really a foul character. And that's his son who was behind the curtain and sabotaging my career, Dr. Michael Berry. But everywhere you turn, there's these right-wing extremists, religious radicals, Freemasons. I'm putting this program for alcoholics at my airline, even though I never had any diagnosis or symptoms of alcoholism. My sponsor at the airline, he's another Christian crusader from a military family who's got, his bunker mentality and his guns and his surveillance system all over his house in a gated driveway in this mostly white county in North Carolina. And it was that way from start to finish. These people coming out of the woodwork, trying to silence me, manipulate me, frame me, threaten me, scare me. And it goes back to the house. Okay. So my ex-father-in-law, when he's involved in this Patriot Network, white supremacist, anti-government organization in 1986, he wears a wire to set up one of his co-conspirators, 2 of his co-conspirators, Timothy Yarbrough and I forget the other character's name right now, but anyway, Tony DeMurray. Tony DeMurray actually was also another NASA engineer, believe it or not, while he was plotting against the government. So he wears a wire to set up Yarbrough and makes a deal with the government to avoid prison time. So while they're awaiting trial, he takes out a permit to build this house in Niceville, Florida. Well, the property is owned by this billionaire John Birch Society nut, Charles Walter Russell II, whose family donated the property for Eglin Air Force Base, family was involved with the mob and so forth. And this Ruckle character sat on the board of directors, or the executive council of the John Birch Society, with people like Nelson Bunker Hunt, and was handpicked by Mr. Robert Welch himself. Okay, so they own the property. Nobles takes out the permit to build a house, and this Knight Templar military veteran, Freemason, builder builds the house. Same year, Nobles, Mac's father-in-law, enters into these corporations in South Florida with this real estate attorney, Leslie Michael Osmond, and his brothers. They're all Church of Christ leaders, Mac's father-in-law and all these Osmond brothers, with names like androgynous and androgyny, androgen, androkin, alchemy, pellucid, tabula rasa, augury, prescience, Solomon builders, all this Solomonic witchcraft, occult, Knight Templar, hocus pocus. And so, my kids get kidnapped back in, going back to the beginning, 2008. I finally get them back 3 months later, and my son is obsessively drawing pictures of, this pagan altar, statues of Anubis, pyramids, swords with skulls on the handle, machine guns, a drug lab, gas masks, grenades, and it's all underground on this property. And what they are is just a bunch of modern day Klansmen, a bunch of white supremacists. Why the government was protecting them, I can't conclusively say. I know he told my son that he was a secret agent for the government. So whether he was an informant or actively, this was,
Or used an intel operation.
Prince of the Revolution, Eric Prince and a bunch of neo-Confederates working together. I don't know. I know they had an electric chair and torture devices. And but my sons suffered severe debilitating mental injuries. They were psychologically tortured, sexually assaulted, exploited in child pornography, and over the next 2 years after that, there were 18 total reports, medical doctors, psychologists, therapists, school principal, just an army of these mandatory reporters making reports. They all disappeared into a black hole, all got batted away. And the ploy that was used was, I'm just the crazy guy. Nobody else but me has made these allegations. Label me crazy, try to frame me for false reporting on reports that I didn't make and that weren't false. So,
Mark, let me ask you about, because I'm still a little sketchy on the incident that you were talking about, the murder. So your kids witnessed this murder. Was this while they were kidnapped?
yes, I believe. Here's what happened. So I'm trying to protect I filed a restraining order. He kidnaps the kids. So, and he surrendered an arsenal of weapons when I filed a restraining order, which the sheriff's department gave back and tried to cover up, despite the fact that he's a felon, which was another interesting aspect of the story.
And that's your former father-in-law, right?
Yeah. Right. So anyhow, so they think they have this judge in their pocket, and they did, because this judge did some unbelievable stuff. And the judge, his wife was a top staffer for Congressman Jeff Miller, another ultra right-winger, another Freemason, who actually held the same congressional seat as his predecessor, Freemason predecessor, that I was just telling you about, this Knight Templar guy. Anyway, so this drags on for 3 months. I finally get my court hearing. They file a restraining order against me when I refuse to comply with their extortion demands, claiming I'm mentally ill for believing my kids were molested. So I'm erratic and unstable for believing my kids, and that was the basis of a restraining order against me. So anyhow, Ed Fleming, Bush attorney, sets me up with this crooked attorney who makes deals behind my back, sells me out, and ends up warning me, saying, your life is in danger, you're in a cult. And a day or two later, drops me like a hot potato with no explanation and leaves me high and dry defending myself. Well, I defended myself in court and won. They dropped the restraining order against me. They couldn't keep my kids from me anymore. So Nobles and his family literally sprint across the courthouse parking lot, hop in their car, speed away, and go snatch Gabe, my oldest, from his school. And this is when the kids saw a flurry of activity. They're hauling crates of guns and 55-gallon drums, loading them on a utility trailer that he's stolen from me and hauling it away. Murder, their grandmother trying to scrub the blood off the carpet. Then they end up removing the carpet from the house, hiding stuff in the attic and sealing it up. And I was actually there just a couple of weeks later as they tried to prove to me that all the stuff that my son told me wasn't true. Well, what I saw there was confirmation that it all was true. The entire backyard had been dug up. The attic was sealed up with no entrance. The carpet had been removed from the house. There were deep ruts in the yard leading to the backyard where a truck and trailer had been pulled up there. So, yeah, in this flurry of activity, they saw their grandfather murder a man in his living room. According to Gabe, his grandfather made him help bury the guy in the backyard. And then at some point long enough where the body was already decaying, they dug it up, hauled it out to this spot at the Eglin Air Force Base reservation, hung it from a tree and burned it in some sort of ritualistic manner. And the reason I say it's a ritualistic manner is Gabe described his grandfather marking circles around this tree and digging around the tree. And we found the tree, one lone tree burnt to a crisp, chopped away at the base of the tree with an axe, with 2 concentric magic circles dug around the tree. Now, I wasn't prepared at the time, even for years after that, to say these were magic circles because it was just too hard to believe. But looking back, that's what it was. You look at the totality of these people and their bizarre occult beliefs. That's what they were. They were magic circles. Speaking of magic, another aspect of the story, the kids talked about being victimized by Papa's evil twin. Well, turns out Papa, their grandfather, has a brother who looks just like him. Well, guess what? He's all over the internet with his witchcraft, spell books with pentagrams on the cover. A fan of Aleister Crowley and all that crowd. Just dozens of books about witchcraft on his Goodreads list. He's a member of the Texas Witches and has been a Wiccan at one time. So it runs in the family.
Wow, there's a lot there, a lot. Bill, you got some before I go on here?
No, go ahead. I'm just trying to process all this.
Yeah, it's a lot to process, but
Me too. 15 years later, I'm still trying to process.
I can't even imagine, Mark.
Mark, it does tie into a lot that we do on our show. We talk about how the overworld and the underworld connect at secret levels and how all these groups, work with one another. And like you said, it wasn't this global conspiracy. It's kind of just standard operating procedure with the way these people operate. And when you talk about the intel community, it's normal for them to use Ku Klux Klan members on operations or Mafia
even churches,
Sure, and the religious right wing is a big part of this. Yeah. The church and stuff is very important in this whole story, and it's interesting how this whole sex trafficking thing, has been kind of gaslighted by media on the right to blame the left.
Yeah,
when the truth is, a lot of this stuff is coming from the right. Like I was talking about the extremists. I'm not talking about a moderate who goes to the right of the band. We're talking about extremists.
Yes,
and these sex trafficking kids and stuff, and a lot of that is orchestrated by the right wing.
Yes, it is, and again, the kids made, and I got a pile of records. I could share you some of the excerpts from therapists and so forth, and it's awful stuff. But they repeatedly disclose being victimized in child pornography. They disclose being shown pictures of their own mother as a child being victimized to convince them it was okay. But you see the same parallels with this creep, this HR manager who went on to become the program manager at Delta Airlines. He's hiding behind religion. He's got all the Freemasons in his family and a corrections officer and cops and so forth. And what's he doing? He's preying on kids too. But then there was another case in Walton County that I found that was connected, where the neighbors said that this house was getting frequent visits friendly visits by law enforcement. These very withdrawn foster kids who they believe were being sexually abused, and this guy throwing around money. This Frenchman, he's a French national. I tracked him down. He was actually a French citizen, and he's back in France, which makes us international now. Well, guess what? His business partners were a Church of Christ minister, and this big shot Pentagon official who was a follower of Aleister Crowley. And those kids, the whole family disappeared in the middle of the night, according to multiple neighbors, leaving all this child pornography, camera equipment, and stuff behind. Nobody knows what happens to the kids, and they covered it all up. And I found this recently. It's not in the book, but this guy, Michel Raphael Barthélemy, the Frenchman, he was on the donor list for the National Republican Congressional Committee. So there you have it. Another Franklin scandal all over again. So,
Wow.
We will be right back. DK's Corner, now located at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania, is serving up the area's best tasting food at respectable prices. Known for our great cheesesteaks, DK's also has delicious breakfast sandwiches, specialty coffees, and catering 7 days a week. You'll love the wraps, soups, and pizza too. We're now open Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and Saturday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Visit DK's Corner on Facebook to see our daily specials, and make sure to follow and like us while you're there. We offer local delivery to homes and businesses, takeout, or come and dine in our new restaurant in Jessup. Call or text DK's Corner at 570-209-0278 or hit us up on DoorDash. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You.
Yeah, and it's just amazing how all these groups work together and everything. And let's talk about another. There was a tie into Eric Rudolph too, the Olympic bomber, wasn't there?
well, the only connection there was my ex-father-in-law was a big fan of Eric Rudolph. He told my son he had blueprints to blow up an IRS building, and I don't doubt that he did. I mean, these people, leopards don't change their spots. These right-wing extremists, they don't ever change. It's rare. And but when we worked together, I was flipping houses, and we did that for a while as a side thing. He would talk about his days of his pals in the Posse Comitatus, and they're seeing their counterfeiting operation, but he would frequently comment, gloating about how Eric Rudolph was still free when he was on the run. He seemed to be happy that the guy was getting away with it before he was captured. But you're talking about a guy who was part of an organization that marched with David Duke to protest the removal of the flag and the Confederate flag in South Carolina, that had all these overlapping ties with groups like Aryan Nations and Posse Comitatus and the Order and so forth. All those groups, if you'd start digging, they're intertwined. You have, and what's interesting is the most common link you find in all those organizations are past membership in the John Birch Society.
Yeah. Talk about the John Birch Society for a little bit.
I'm sorry?
Can you talk about the John Birch Society a little bit?
Well, sure. This guy, Charles Walter Ruckle II, who owned the property where the house was built, he was the icon of Northwest Florida, the kind of the godfather there. He pretty much owned everything and everybody. I found a horrific article back from the 70s talking about Vietnamese refugees, and they're talking about forming and they're interviewing this guy from the John Birch Society bookstore, and they talk about the local bank that hands out John Birch Society literature with your bank statements. Well, that was Ruckle's bank. That was Ruckle's John Birch Society bookstore. And they're talking about how these Vietnamese, they must be communists, they're diseased, they're going to start the Ku Klux Klan, kill one of them to send a message and so forth. But the sad thing is, you could take that article and put it out there today talking about, Republicans talking about immigrants. It's hardly changed. Everywhere you turn, one of the guys that Noble set up, one of his co-conspirators, you can look this up, Trinity Free Presbyterian Church in Trinity, Alabama. He helped found that church. It's a white supremacist church, big time. They have pictures of Robert E. Lee on the wall in the church office. The pastor's a Confederate reenactor. They invite people like John Weaver, a rabid white supremacist, there to speak. He's a a leader in the League of the South and Sons of Confederate Veterans, and advocates another civil war and so forth. So that's what these people really are. But this guy Yarbrough, he's a Christian Reconstructionist. He was involved in the Chalcedon Foundation. Well, guess who helped fund the Chalcedon Foundation? Nelson Bunker Hunt, another financier of the John Birch Society.
Right.
My ex-father-in-law now, him and his family have this little family compound they built in Harrison, Arkansas. What's in Harrison, Arkansas? It's the home of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. It's the most racist town in America. And this guy named Rob, I forgot his first name, who's the Imperial Wizard of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. Well, guess what what his past is? John Birch Society. So,
Yeah.
and then and one thing I didn't, I'm somewhat reluctant to bring this up because you call it conspiracy theorists, whatever. They had this trophy there that my ex-father told my son was a hero's weapon and claimed it was the gun that killed John F. Kennedy. They had it in this glass case, accompanied by newspaper articles of the assassination and stuff. And given the intersection of people and characters with this man and that house and their corporations and so forth, it's certainly plausible that that was true. Because, you probably know enough about you may know more about the John F. Kennedy assassination than me, but you're talking about Trafficante, you're talking about Edwin Walker and the John Birch Society and the Bay of Pigs and right-wing radicals in the military, and the white supremacists. I don't know,
Well,
so.
I do want to touch on that, but before I get to that, I want to go back to something when you were talking about these hardcore anti-government people, these hardcore right-wingers, these the militants.
Yeah.
They hate the left-wing part of the government, but they work pretty closely with the right-wing Republican hardcore. And you see this, I'm currently reading a book on, Timothy McVeigh. And of course, Timothy McVeigh was visited by Dr. Jolene West, who was in the MK Ultra program. So how do you explain that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so you see this common that these hardcore anti-government guys, they only hate the left side of the government. They don't hate the right, the hardcore, right? And you see that today. You see everything with MAGA and Trump. You see that,
Yeah. That brings another tentacle into the story. Talking about McVeigh, they found the copy of the Turner Diaries in his car, written by William Luther Pierce. And I'm drawing a blank as the name of his neo-Nazi organization. But anyway, William Luther Pierce bought the property from Bernard Classen in North Carolina, near where I grew up, a compound of the another neo-Nazi organization. Anyhow, the World Church of the Creator, that's what it was called. So anyway, Classen offed himself, handed over the reins to the World Church of the Creator to a guy named Rick McCarty. Where does he move the headquarters of this neo-Nazi organization? To Niceville, Florida. And so then and again, Classen's background was, guess what? The John Birch Society.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about this because I found all these strange ties. So I said, okay, well, where was this, where was this corporation, this neo-Nazi group registered? So I looked it up on the corporate records and I found the house where it was registered. So I did some research on who owned the house. Well, the neo-Nazi organization, World Church of the Creator, moved its headquarters to Niceville, Florida, into the home of a Eglin Air Force Base military weapons researcher. Now, if that's not concerning, I don't know what is. Why was a neo-Nazi headquarters based at the home of an active duty military explosives researcher based at Eglin Air Force Base, who's now back in Mississippi, and I found him on Facebook, and he's very fond of the Confederate statues and so forth. So strange stuff going on there in the town of Niceville and at Eglin Air Force Base over the years.
So I do want to touch back because you mentioned the Kennedy assassination. Of course, I've been looking into this since I was in high school. And I always said that you have to look at the assassination really, you look at it as 3 levels. You have the sponsor level, you have the operational manager level, and then you have the mechanics level the actual assassins and everything. And I always said that, after investigating all these years and talking to all these great researchers who went even deeper, once you take out the CIA, like any theory that anybody has, once you take out like James Angleton or Alan Dulles, everything falls apart. So you can't take those guys out. Like, they're instrumental in everything. But I do feel the mechanical level, the CIA used, like, for instance, Mafia members,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Klan members a lot. And I'm interested in, we're going to have a guy coming on in a couple of weeks on the Ku Klux Klan tie-in, because a lot of the Dallas Police Department, we talked to Joe McBride about this, the Dallas Police
Yep.
Department at the time had a lot of members who were Ku Klux Klan.
Yes. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
Go ahead.
and you probably know their names. I don't from memory. I know one was Chief Curry, but the police chief, the Dallas county sheriff, the officer, I think his name was McDonald, that arrested Lee Harvey Oswald at the theater, gave him the black eye. James Lavelle, who escorted.
No, that's the one McBride interviewed, Lavelle.
Right.
Yeah.
He actually showed him his Klan card.
He showed him. He took the card out.
Well, they were also all, and you can verify this. I've done it. I found all their obituaries. They're all Freemasons, every one of them.
Yeah, and so was Alan Dulles.
And there was a study done, none other than in Dallas, Texas, that showed overlapping membership between Ku Klux Klan and Freemasons.
Right. And see, why I think this is so important is because I think there was a lot of reasons why John and Bobby Kennedy were taken out. A lot of it had to do with John Kennedy's foreign policy. That had a lot to do. But I think one of the things that people don't understand is the civil rights, both JFK and RFK. I think that had a lot more to do with them being taken out than people want to talk about. Because a lot of people try to say that, he was slow on civil rights, which we debunked on our show. I mean, they were doing more than was done 100 years before them. They were doing in a couple of years. So and I think that was really aggravating because, like you said, a lot of these people overlap. Like Alan Dulles is a Freemason, and a lot of these groups overlap. And Dallas police officers, they might be working intelligence for police department intelligence, working with the CIA, but they're also in the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, and the John Birch Society.
And John Birch Society, of course, Guy Bannister was big in the.
J.D. Tippett was a leader.
J.D. Tippett, yeah. I mean, all of this overlaps, and it's just a web of corruption and just a way of doing business. It's common business.
Yep.
But wasn't there was a Jack Ruby tie-in, right?
Well, excuse me, I cough again. There was an interesting potential Jack Ruby tie-in. This guy, Charles Walter Ruckle II, this John Birch Society leader in Niceville, Florida, who owned the property where the house was built and whose family donated the property for Eglin Air Force Base, so forth. He was in the Civil Air Patrol, like Lee Harvey Oswald. I don't remember if Jack Ruby was in the Civil Air Patrol.
No, Jack Ruby wasn't, but David Ferry ran that.
But he was also an aircraft mechanic, just like in the Army Air Corps, at the same time Jack Ruby was, and they were both assigned to Keesler Air Force Base. So I don't know if their service there overlapped, if there's a potential that they knew each other, but I know they had the same job at the same time, and they were both assigned to Keesler Air Force Base. So that's and then of course you had the fact that Capone outfit, had history with the Ruckle family going back to the 20s and 30s. So
it's unbelievable web of corruption. Go ahead, Billy.
So, Mark, and we can edit this out if you're not comfortable. And again, this is just coming from, I don't know much about. I didn't, get a chance to read the book. I don't know much about your case, your situation here, but I'm just curious about your wife. Is she, what part does she have in this? I mean, you still with her? I don't know anything.
No. We separated in 2008, and it was a result of the separation that started the ball rolling because she moved in with her parents. The kids began to become sexually abused there.
Okay.
And the reports were made to disappear and go uninvestigated. I filed a restraining order to protect them, and things just kept escalating.
Okay.
We we got a divorce. I mean, we were separated forever. We finally actually finalized the divorce. Was it 2018, I think? Because I was planning to get remarried. She wanted to get remarried. But I haven't spoken to her in years. You know, she wrote things over the years, some of us in the book, but you know, crucifixion, burning, sacrifices, infanticide, being locked in a cage, trapped in a hole, all these horrific religious occult references, and she had definite signs of trauma from her own childhood abuse. So that's that. So
Okay.
I thought she was done with all this. I was very proud of her for getting away from it. She moved out got remarried, moved out to Colorado. Well, a couple of years ago, I found out she's on the family compound in Harrison, Arkansas now. So I always go back to the monster. So
Yeah. Oh boy.
We could edit that out too, Mark, if you're not comfortable keeping that in. Just
okay.
Just let us know, because this is pre-recorded.
Yeah.
It's out there already. So
okay.
Okay.
So, Bill, you got anything else?
Not just, just the hypocrisy of the, these religious nuts. I mean, everything claims, claims to be based on, the love of religion and the love of God, and there's no love involved at all. It's all hate.
No, yeah, the pastor of his church accused me. He said, "You're warped, twisted, and unstable, and God's against you. If you don't stop this, we're going to rebuke and disfellowship you." To stop this was protecting my kids with a restraining order. And he was a local sheriff's department chaplain. The local sheriff, the local chief deputy who became the sheriff, he would stand in front of congregations with his gun and his badge and claim to be representing the law of God. The ATF, the agent in charge of the local ATF office who blew me off and lied to me, he was working on his theology degree from some racist, homophobic mail order school. I mean, the government is full of these people, I've learned.
Right. Yep.
And talking about, you have Pam Bondi up there now. Want to call everybody a terrorist, everybody's a human trafficker, everybody's this and that. And you got a real potential domestic terrorist here who spent a lifetime associated with violent hate groups, who's raping and torturing kids, really, and there's more than ample evidence to support that. And they just make up these allegations against, somebody from El Salvador because they have a Chicago Bulls hat on.
Right.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Without due process, and it's just, and I just want to go on a little rant too about this, because, I was born and raised Catholic, and of course, every time, they bring up the scandal with the molesting the kids and stuff, it's always front page news. But it seems to me like when it's the Southern Christian Protestant doing this, it's always in the back burner. It's never, because the WASP media is controlled. They control the narrative, and this never comes out. So a story like yours is going to be buried, and the thing is, if this was like a Catholic priest, it would be first front page. And of course, you have Trump dressing up as the Pope and totally disrespectful, and just, stuff like that goes on. It's just, but you don't see this. You don't see this as often, but like Bill said, the hypocrisy that goes on. And I'm not going to say I'm not applying every single Protestant church. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying these extreme churches, especially in places in the deep South. This is very common.
Yeah, it is. And, give you a couple examples. When they kidnapped my kids, had audio recordings of extortion demands, drop the allegations if you want to see your kids again and so forth, awful, gruesome stuff. I approached the press to try to, the press, when not only did they not report it, they tipped off the church.
Yeah.
The church put on Civic Duty Day, bringing in a circuit judge, the mayor, a city councilman, where they railed against child sexual abuse and child pornography from before the pulpit. Absolute total projection, railing against what they were really doing.
Right. And that's what they do. I think you find the religious, extremists who are most outspoken against homosexuality are typically homosexual. They're
look at my ex-father-in-law. He was raping little boys.
Right.
Yeah. It's a shame. It's really a shame.
And Yeah, and I know we're out of time. I don't want to go over because I want to keep this manageable for you guys and for the listener. But we've talked about the FAA. We've talked about, some of these. You would not believe the number of local, state, and federal agencies who just ended up outright lying in official statements and official letters and official reports. I'm talking about some big shots. I got their names, their signatures on the documents.
Wow.
And, this guy was absolutely untouchable. Anybody who fixed things for him was untouchable as well.
Wow.
And like I've told Chris this, Milligan and others, this quit being about Mike Nobles for me a long time ago. This is about the system. This is about the people who were supposed to be there to protect my kids, the people who were supposed to protect my rights,
Right.
who ended up putting knives in our backs and covering the whole thing up and hanging us out to dry. It's the entire system is corrupt. I had nowhere to turn, because I didn't have $1 million to go hire an army of lawyers like they had. And if you don't, then you have no rights. You have no rights in America if you're up against this kind of power.
No, you don't.
You're wealthy.
Not against this. Yeah, it's an incredible story, and I hope everybody reads this book because it's an important story that has to get out. And like I said before, we have it on our bookshop. People could get it there, and we'll put the link up. But just a tremendous story. And Mark, is there anything else that you want to cover that we didn't cover that's in the book that you think is very important?
I think we've hit the bulk of it. It's, I want people to, I don't want other people to have to suffer through this. So I want them to understand how this happened, the formulas that they used. I want to hold the people, the public officials publicly accountable for what they did in this. They may never be fired or prosecuted, but I want their names out there. I'd like to see some form of justice for my kids, for these kids who disappeared in the middle of the night in Walton County, for Mike Noble's foster kids, for this HR manager, James Brinberry's foster kids. At least he's in jail now. And to end the hypocrisy that you just talked about.
Yeah.
Oh,
well, thank you, Mark. The book is called Houses of the Holy, A Nightmare Web of Hate, Crime, Corruption, and Child Abuse. And boy, is it ever. We really appreciate you taking the time to come on and speak with us. This is
fascinating, Mark.
It really is. Yeah, it's intense. It's quite a story. So we thank you.
Well, thank you. I look forward to it. It's been a good interview. So.
And the shout out to your resilience too. To go
absolutely
come out the other side. It's tribute to everybody. It's unbelievable.
Well, thanks. I was beaten down pretty bad for a while, but
yeah.
Who wouldn't be?
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Mark. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.